All right, so we're on page 104, chapter 8, two wives. And we did go over this just a bit last week, but I want to start right back from the beginning. It says here, with few exceptions, our book thus far has spoken of men, but what we have said applies quite as much to women. Our activities in behalf of women who drink are on the increase. There is every evidence that women regain their health. Does that sound like something we've heard before? Regaining our health? See that term, regain? If we remember what the definition according to Webster's is of recovered, it's to be returned to a normal state of health. So in other words, you're saying that they recover as readily as men if they try our suggestions. Now, here's a key word there too, suggestions. We see that every once in a while in here, but we also see directions. Page 29, right at the very beginning, says clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered. So are these suggestions or are they directions? Well, if you take it all into context, this is the way that works, because that's been a point of contention I've heard sometimes in meetings. The deal is we offer our way of living to newcomers and anybody, but let's just talk about new people in AA. We say, okay, I felt just like you did. This is what I did, and I don't feel that way anymore. And if you haven't found a way to feel any better, I'll show you what I did. At that point, it's a suggestion. If you'd like to try it, fine. If not, hopefully you're not alcoholic, because if you are, according to this book, you're going to go die. But it's up to you. We're going to make you do it. You do what you want. Suggest it. But if you decide to do it, oh, well, then we have clear-cut directions as to how to do it. They're not suggestions. Because when we get into thinking that these steps are done in a suggestive way, it means, oh, you might suggest a different way. Then we get into opinions. And if you have a bunch of opinions, there's no path to thoroughly follow for it to be rare for us to fail. This is very, very clear cut. So while the program itself is suggestive, what's within the program working it is directions. But for every man who drinks, others are involved. The wife who trembles in fear of the next debauch. The mother and father who see their son wasting away. Among us are wives, relatives, and friends whose problem has been solved. See, now these people don't have a drinking problem. What problem do they got that's been solved? If you remember, we read earlier, very early in the book, I think of somewhere in the second or third chapter, one of the case studies says, quite as important was it to find out, not just the drinking was taken away, it says, quite as important was it to find that spiritual principles would solve all my problems. All my problems. That's what we're looking for here, solving all of our problems. As well as some who have not yet found a happy solution. We want the wives of Alcoholics Anonymous to address the wives of men who drink too much. What they say will apply to nearly everyone bound by ties of blood or affection to the alcoholic. As wives of Alcoholics Anonymous, we would like you to feel that we understand as perhaps few can. We want to analyze mistakes we've made. We want to leave you with the feeling that, I would underline, no situation is too difficult and no unhappiness too great to be overcome. Solving the problem. We've traveled a rocky road, there is no mistake about it. We've had long rendezvous with hurt, pride, frustration, self-pity, misunderstanding, and fear, and these are not pleasant companions. That doesn't sound like a happy way to live there, now does it? I think they could use a bit of the promises that we just read when you're talking about feeling that way. We've been driven to maudlin sympathy to bitter resentment. Some of us veered from extreme to extreme, ever hoping that one day our loved ones would be themselves once more. Our loyalty and the desire to our husbands hold up their heads and be like other men have begotten all sorts of predicaments. We have been unselfish and self-sacrificing. We've told innumerable lies to protect our pride and our husbands' reputations. We've prayed, we've begged, and we've been patient. We struck out viciously, we've run away, we've been hysterical, we've been terror-stricken, we've sought sympathy, we've had retaliatory love affairs with other men. Our homes have been battlegrounds many an evening. In the morning, we've kissed and made up. Our friends have counseled, chucking the men, and we have done so with finality, only to be back in a little while, hoping, always hoping. But underline this goes back to the cycle the doctor talked about. Our men have sworn great solemn oaths that they were through with drinking forever. You guys remember reading that? It's one of the last things we do in our cycle as we as we emerge remorseful from whatever happened from our last drinking bout. And what's the next thing we do? Oh, it's not worth it. I am done, solemn oath to never do this again. Remember that? And that's what they see us doing. Done for good. But what's the next thing that happens? When we do that, if you guys remember, we are now sober. We're using our willpower to stay that way. Because we truly, when they're saying that we have made these solemn oaths, and I've asked this question before doing this chapter when we're in the doctor's opinion, how many of you, and it's actually one of the questions on page 44 to determine whether you're an alcoholic, how many of you have tried quitting for good and honestly wanted to? It wasn't because of your spouse or the courts or anything else, but you honestly wanted to quit and ended up going back to it, right? So when they're saying that we've made solemn oaths, it wasn't to lie to them. In most cases, some it may. But many of us, we truly meant that we wanted to stop. But the problem is that what we've learned is once we're sober on our willpower, we start getting miserable, start getting restless, irritable, and discontent. We start thinking about the ease and comfort we're going to get from those drinks. And nothing else provides us that ease and comfort. And the longer we stay sober on our willpower, the more restless, irritable, and discontent we get. And we don't even get that drink in between to give us that ease and comfort. The longer you're sober, well, in my experience, the sicker I got. So that's what leads us back. And when we go back to it, it's because we need that ease and comfort so bad that we do not reflect on the consequences as we read on page 24. That is probably one of the most important things that if you're going to get through to somebody you're working with their loved one, is that point. Is that you weren't even part of the picture. It's not because they didn't love you that they went back when they made this solemn oath, and they went back to it. It's not because of that. You gave them an ultimatum and they decided to drink. They didn't decide to drink. We have lost the power of choice and drink. Now, something I didn't point out last week, and I want to point out today, is that is not an excuse. Not one bit. It is simply an explanation. We're 100% responsible for everything we've done and every bit of hurt that we've caused them. And that's why we have a separate part of this process to make amends, which amends is considered to be equal restitution. It's restitution we're looking for. It's not, I'm sorry. They already know we're sorry, right? They've dealt with our sorry ass for long enough. They know we're sorry, right? It's about what are we doing to make restitution. So that's what we do to the best of our ability. But I just wanted to point that piece out, the solemn oaths. We have believed them when no one else could or would. Then in days, weeks, or months, a fresh outburst. Fresh outburst, that is keyword for a spree, right? We pick it up and then we pick up that one and we lose all control over the amount we take. We have a physical craving beyond our mental control that leads us into a spree. And a spree is defined as unrestricted overindulgence. Does that define anybody's drinking patterns? Unrestricted overindulgence. Okay. We seldom had friends at our homes, never knowing how or when the men of the house would appear. We could make few social engagements. We came to live almost alone. When we were invited out, our husbands sneaked so many drinks that they spoiled the occasion. If, on the other hand, they took nothing, their self-pity made them killjoys. If they took nothing, doesn't that mean that they were sober? And what were they like? Self-pity, killjoys. That's how we are when we're sober. The inability of being happy and sober at the same time. There was never financial security. Positions were always in jeopardy or gone, and our car could not have brought the pay envelopes home. The checking account melted like snow in June. Sometimes there were other women. How heartbreaking was this discovery? How cruel to be told they understood our men as we did not. Always when I go through these first few pages, everybody gets really quiet. And the reason I say that is because I've come to see that we want to be in denial of every bit of this. There's a point in the book where they talk about as alcoholics, and I was thinking about this last night in the middle of the night, I have no idea why, but it says that alcoholics want to enjoy a certain reputation about themselves that they know deep inside they don't deserve. And that's us. So we don't want to look at this stuff, but being forced to look at this that's why we do steps 4 through 9, to look at our behavior so that we're not blaming everybody else in the world for our situation. Well, she wouldn't have done this. Well, he wouldn't have. No, it's all about us. That's what we have to be confronted with. The bill collectors, the sheriffs, the angry taxi drivers, the policemen, the bums, the pals, and even the ladies they sometimes brought home, our husbands thought we were so inhospitable. Joy killer, nag, wet blanket. That's what they said. Next day, they would be themselves again, and we would forgive and try to forget. We tried to hold the love of our children for their father. We've told small tots that father was sick, which was much nearer the truth than we realized. They struck the children, kicked out door panels, smashed treasured crockery, and ripped the keys out of the piano. In the midst of such pandemonium, they may have rushed out threatening to live with the other woman forever. In desperation, we've even gotten tight ourselves, the drunk to end all drunks. The unexpected result was that our husbands seemed to like it. Perhaps at this point we got a divorce and took the children home to father and mother. Then we were severely criticized by our husband's parents for desertion. Usually we did not leave. We stayed on and on. We finally sought employment ourselves, and destitution faced us and our families. I mean, the amount that these people have gone through and we have put them through is just incomprehensible in most cases. You know that? Really is. The pain that we have caused other people. We're so consumed with ourselves and our own pain. You know, we come into AA, we come to our first meeting, and I've said this before, you know, I don't come through there. I didn't learn this till later, but I didn't come through the door because I wanted to stop drinking. I truly believe that today. That gave me ease and comfort. That was a solution, just as the book says. That made sense. I just couldn't stand the way I felt. And the problem is, think about that. What's our main problem? Selfishness, self-centered. Of course I don't like the way I felt. Did I say I just can't stand the way I'm treating my family? I haven't heard one person say that yet coming through that door. I just can't stand the way I treat them. I'm happy, but boy, no. Yeah, it's incredible. We began to ask medical advice as the sprees got closer together. The alarming physical and mental symptoms, the deepening pall of remorse, depression, and inferiority that settled down on our loved ones, these things terrified and distracted us. As animals on a treadmill, we've patiently and wearily climbed, falling back in exhaustion after each futile effort to reach solid ground. Most of us had entered the final stage with its commitment to health resorts, sanitariums, hospitals, jails, and even treatment centers now. Sometimes they were screaming delirium and insanity, and death was often near. So under these conditions, we naturally made mistakes. Some of them rose out of ignorance of alcoholism. Get that? So if we just take that at face value, they made mistakes, they say. So we're going to learn from their mistakes so we don't reinvent the wheel, right? That's the idea for the loved ones. I'm going to tell you what we did so you might not make those same mistakes. But it says that most of them rose out of ignorance of alcoholism. Why do you think when we sit down with a newcomer's family, the first thing we do is explain to them about alcoholism? This ignorance of alcoholism, it destroys families as well, just as much. You know, they said that this book is meant to comfort and inform those who have been affected as well. Inform. That's what we do, is inform them. Teach them out of the first 4 chapters of the book, first 3 chapters in the doctor's opinion. At least go over it. Again, on 1939aa.com, you go to documents, you go to step documents, you go to 12th step, and you'll see there's a family orientation guide there. Not something made up out of opinion. Just goes over each page in this book that's going to be directed right at those tied by love or affection to the alcoholic to give them an understanding, not only of our problem, but also the solution that we offer is a better way of living. It's all there. So just want to let you know that resource is available. Sometimes we sense dimly that we were dealing with sick men. Had we fully understood the nature of the alcoholic illness, we might have behaved differently. How could men who love their wives and children be so unthinking and so callous and so cruel? There could be no love in such persons, we thought. And just as we were being convinced of their heartlessness, they would surprise us with fresh resolves and new attentions. For a while, they would be their old sweet selves, only to dash the new structure of affection to pieces once more. Asked why they commenced to drink again, and they would reply with some silly excuse or none. It was so baffling, so heartbreaking. Could we have been so mistaken about the men we married? Go back to that sentence. Asked why they commenced to drink again, they would reply with some silly excuse or none. We read that earlier too, if you remember. Said every once in a while, an alcoholic will tell the truth. And that's something that only happens every once in a while. It says every once in a while, when they come to, and you ask them, why did you pick it up again? It says that they might give an excuse. But if they were honest, and sometimes they are, they have no more of an idea why they picked it up than you do. That ignorance of alcoholism settles in deep with the alcoholic as well. I have no idea. You know, while they're thinking you don't love me, that's what I'm thinking. Did losing my family not mean anything to me? How could I have picked it up? And then we're filled with what? Fear, guilt, shame, and remorse. Right? Destroys everybody all the way around. It was so baffling, so heartbreaking. Could we have been so mistaken in the men we married? When drinking, they were strangers. Sometimes they were so inaccessible that it seemed as though a great wall had been built up around them. Did anybody have that happen between them and their family members? A wall building up around them? Boy, that was really deep with me. That's one of the main things that happened here for myself. You know, and I even want to take us back because what they're talking about there is that second part of step one that we ignore a lot. We always talk about, well, it's about powerless bull. And actually, you know, in Al-Anon, don't they use the same 12 steps here? Okay, same 12 steps. But see, they're not powerless over alcohol. They don't have that problem that we have of the mind and body. But that's not the solution we already talked about that we're looking for. We're not trying to solve the alcohol problem. We're trying to solve the unmanageable life problem. That's the problem that we all have in common is this unmanageable life. So if you want to look at what an unmanageable life is, whether you're alcoholic or not, turn to page 52, second full paragraph. They give us some good examples of what an unmanageable life is to be explained to look like. And I'll tell you, any one of these symptoms of an unmanageable life we're going to read, any one of them is an example of an unmanageable life. It says, first thing that it says, we're having troubles with our personal relationships. Right out of the gate. Anybody have problem with their personal relationships when they got here? Yeah. Do you think our loved ones had problems with their personal relationships at minimum with us? Oh yeah. Same problem, same solution. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were prey to misery and depression. Couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We're full of fear. Didn't we just read that about the loved ones? Full of fear. We were just unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. That's our dilemma, guys. That's what keeps us restless, irritable, and discontent. Constantly looking for something to make us feel better. And guess what? They don't even have that. They're just miserable. And the longer they stay on, the more miserable they get too. You know, terrible. How could men who love their wives and children be so unthinking and callous? I got through that. Where was I at here? Oh, last paragraph. The wall being built around. And even if they did not love their families, how could they be so blind about themselves? Well, they pick it up knowing what they're going to go through. What had become of their judgment, their common sense, and their willpower? There's your misunderstanding of alcoholism. Because that's what everybody's going to ask. You go to court, the judge says, you get caught drinking again, I'm throwing your butt in jail for a year. You go out and drink again, what's the judge thinking? What has become of your judgment and your common sense and your willpower to stay quit? Obviously, it was more important for you to drink. I'm giving you the consequence. Again, the misunderstanding is there was no choice for the alcohol. It is an illness. Illness is defined as a condition that prevents the normal functioning of the mind and or body. But they're asking these questions. And again, it goes back to the beginning of this page. Ignorance of alcoholism. Made a lot of mistakes. If I give you an ultimatum that I'm taking the kids and I'm leaving, if you drink again, that tells me that you don't love me. And now I am going to impose the penalty that I said I was going to impose. Because obviously, that was more important to you. And that statement right there is the ignorance of alcoholism. You think that needs to be explained? Again, it's not an excuse, but do you think it needs to be explained? And I'll tell you, you may get some pushback on that even. You may get a lot of pushback on that even. But then I would turn around and ask, then why do you think they did it? Why do you think they drank it? Do you think they really wanted to lose their family? You really, really deep inside think they don't love you? You think they don't care about their job? You think they want to live in their car? If they have a car? You think they want to go back to jail? Makes no sense, does it? This kind of makes sense. We don't reflect on the consequences. Not all the time. That's why some of us can stay sober for a long time on willpower. Long time, some cases. But if you're an alcoholic, the day will come and you'll pick it up again because there will be a day that you will not reflect on it. That's the key here. It's the key to understand. Why could they not see that drink meant ruin to them? Again, see page 24 for that. Why was it when these dangers were pointed out that they agreed? Yeah, these consequences are severe. And then they got drunk again immediately. These are some of the questions which race through the mind of every woman who has had an alcoholic husband. We hope this book has answered some of them. They hope this book. Sounds like they might need to be looking at this book if they want to get an answer to some of those questions. Isn't that what they're intimating here? It's this book. It's going to answer that. Perhaps your husband has been living in that strange world of alcoholism where everything is distorted and exaggerated. You can see that he really does love you with his better self. Of course, there is such a thing as incompatibility, but in nearly every instance, the alcoholic only seems to be unloving and inconsiderate. Remember, this was written by the wives of more than 100 men and women. It's not written by one person. It's not even written by the alcoholics. Okay, that is their experience, that in nearly every instance, they only seem unloving and only seem inconsiderate. And what underlined is usually because he is warped and sickened. And that he says or does these appalling things. Today, most of our men are better husbands and fathers than ever before. Okay, here's a direction that we're going to give to the loved ones. It's probably the most hardest one, the hardest pill that you're going to try to get them to swallow here. And it says, try not to condemn your alcoholic husband, no matter what he says or does. Are you kidding? Do not condemn him. Okay, it sounds like we're going to need to tell them why, because that's going to be the question that we're going to get. Why shouldn't he pay a consequence for what he says or does? Remember what we read last week about the number one offender that kills more of us than anything? It's resentment. It's resentment. Doesn't make them responsible, but it's just a plain fact, right? We need to be avoiding resentment, and they need to be avoiding trying to doing anything that can create that resentment, because that will lead right back to a spree. He's just another very sick and unreasonable person. Treat him when you can as though he had pneumonia. Underline this: when he angers you, try to remember he is very ill. Sounds like you're going to need to first learn that he's ill and learn what that illness is and how it works before you can start treating him that way. You know, they talk about also, when earlier on in the book, they talk about when somebody has cancer, people feel sorry for them, right? They try to help. But with alcoholic, it ain't like that because they don't see it as an illness. But I'd liken it more to instead of cancer, liken it more to Alzheimer's. Sometimes these people can get way out of control, right? Get mean, harsh. You just say, oh, screw you, I'm out of here. These are sick people. We remember that. Same idea here. These are sick people that you're dealing with. When there is an important exception to the foregoing. We realize some men are thoroughly bad intentioned that no amount of patience will make any difference. An alcoholic of this temperament may be quick to use this chapter as a club over your head. Don't let them get away with it. Hey, stop getting on me because I might drink. Right? Do not let them get away with it. If you're positive he is one of these type, you may feel you had better leave. Is it right to let him ruin your life and the lives of your children? Especially, and I'd underline this, because by this time you're working with this guy, right? Especially when he has before him a way to stop his drinking and abuse if he really wants to pay the price. Remember what I said, we didn't have a choice before. But when you're a new person and we offer you our solution, if you decide not to do it, that you have a choice for. Okay, so now we're on a different playing field. You have the option of doing this if you want to get over your alcoholism. If you don't, that is your choice. He has before him a way out if he really wants to do it. The problem with which you struggle usually falls under one of four categories. All right, we're going to learn about the four husbands. This is very interesting stuff, not only for them, but also for us. Your husband could be number one. This also writes a lot about the ignorance of alcoholism. Your husband may be only a heavy drinker. His drinking may be constant or it may be heavy only on certain occasions. Perhaps he spends too much money for liquor. It may be slowing him up mentally and physically, but he does not see it. Here's a big caveat. I'd underline that. He does not see it. Sometimes he is a source of embarrassment to you and his friends. Underline this piece. Not only does he not see it, he's positive he can handle his liquor. This is a guy who's not ready for step one yet because he still thinks he can control it. That it does him no harm, that drinking is necessary to his business. He probably would be insulted if he were called an alcoholic. This world is full of people like him. Some will moderate or stop altogether, and some will not. Of those who keep on, a good number will become true alcoholics after a while. So the key there is what they're saying is, I always think back, I would say, when somebody says like, well, what's an alcoholic? Oh, well, my Uncle Jim, he's an alcoholic. And then the next sentence out of my mouth, he drinks every day. He drinks in the morning, as if that's what qualifies him as an alcoholic. And we've already learned that that's not the case. It doesn't matter how much you drink, any of that. And here they're pointing that out. You can be a heavy drinker, okay? But what they're talking about, this husband number one, is that he doesn't see it as a problem because he still thinks he can handle it. And then they go on to saying he might be able to. He might only be a heavy drinker. He's not ready for this program yet because he still thinks he can handle it, okay? The question is it comes down to one thing, is if he is able to moderate or stop. That's what they said. Some will moderate or stop altogether. If you can moderate the amount you drink consistently, only have 2 or 3 every single time and no more, or you can stop altogether on your own, according to this book, according to what we read on page 44, you're not an alcoholic. And then it says some will not. If you can't, then you are. It's the only difference. Again, I was an alcoholic at 14 when I came here, and I believe that today. I didn't drink every day. I didn't even know enough to buy it. I found a way to get it, but I was, because I tried quitting. I'd been to treatment twice by then. Couldn't stop, couldn't stay stopped. And then I go to meetings with people who I thought were old, and then would have been 30, so that's all relative, but there weren't too many of them as old as me. They'd say, you can't, they tell me you can't be an alcoholic. I remember a guy said, I had to have spilled more alcohol in my time than you could have drank. As if, again, that's what qualifies for you to be an alcoholic. And then I'd have to come back with some snobby comment of, well, if you weren't a sloppy drunk, you probably wouldn't have spilled it. But none of that matters. It doesn't matter how much you drink or how often you drink. And that's what they're getting to here. He could just be a heavy drinker. The question boils down to those two things. Can he moderate or can he stop for good when he wants to? So now, husband number two, your husband is showing a lack of control, for he is unable to stay on the water wagon even when he wants to. So now this guy's a little different. This guy, instead of thinking he can handle it and that it's not a problem, or he doesn't see it as a problem, this guy has obviously tried to stop and found he can't stay on the water wagon even when he wants to. There's the problem. He often gets entirely out of hand when drinking. And he admits this is true. Very different, number one, but is positive he will do better. So still thinks he can control it, though. Not ready. He has begun to try, with or without your cooperation, various means of moderating or staying dry, code word for sober. Maybe he is beginning to lose his friends. His business may suffer somewhat. He's worried at times and is becoming aware that he cannot drink like other people. He is becoming aware. He sometimes drinks in the morning and through the day also to hold his nerves in check. Remember, all those are just symptoms. Those don't matter as much as, they don't matter at all, actually, as if he can control it or moderate it. He is remorseful after serious drinking bouts. Well, that's part of the cycle, isn't it? Remorseful, and tells you he wants to stop. But when he gets over the spree, he begins to think once more how he can drink moderately next time. We think this person is in danger. These are the earmarks of the real alcoholic. Perhaps he can still tend to business fairly well. He has by no means ruined everything. And we say, as we say among ourselves, he wants to stop. Problem is, he still gets the enjoyment out of it because he knows that when I stop, I get real miserable and I still need it. And the pain is not bad enough yet. We've talked about this many, many times here. Step one, that's not something you do in AA. Step one is what you do when you're out there. Are you beat into a state of reasonableness? And the only thing that's going to beat you into that state is more drinking, more control. Go back, and it tells us when we get with a new person, if they think they can moderate or control, and it's not to do it sarcastically, go out there and try it. The book even says, go out there and try it. Put your best willpower forth. You need to know whether you are one of us or not. Go out there and try it. See if you can do it consistently. You need to know. Go on, do the last one here. Number 3, this husband has gone much further than husband number 2. Though once like number 2, he became worse. His friends have slipped away. His home is in near wreck, and he cannot hold a position. Maybe the doctor has been called in, and the weary round of sanitariums and hospitals has begun. Now, this is what this guy's thinking. I would underline this. He admits he cannot drink like other people, but he doesn't know why. So this guy knows I can't moderate and I can't stop. But where is he? And I don't know why. That's husband number 3. He clings to the notion that he will yet find a way to do so. He may have come to the point where he desperately wants to stop but cannot. That's the guy we want. The guy who wants to stop, and he found that he can't. He's used his willpower and he knows he can't. His case presents additional questions which we shall try to answer for you. You can be quite hopeful of a situation like this. Now, people would think we're progressing. Now we're number 3, and that's the guy you should be hopeful for. Well, that's why. He's been beaten to a state of reasonableness, right? Realizes there's a problem here, and I don't understand it, but I can't stop. That's a hopeful situation. But the last one, number 4, you may have a husband of whom you completely despair. He's been placed in one institution after another. He's violent, only appears definitely insane when drunk. Sometimes he drinks on the way home from the hospital. Perhaps he's had the DTs. Doctors may shake their heads and advise you to have him committed. Maybe you've already been obliged to put him away. This picture may not be as dark as it looks. Many of our husbands were just that far gone, yet they got well, underlined, yet they got well. More desperate? Tells us later, the more desperate they are, it seems that the more powerful, more often than not, the spiritual experiences that they end up actually having. And then, of course, you notice they don't go into husband number 5 because that would be the one that is dead, right? He tried controlling. Remember I think we talked about this last week, this idea of a relapse, and we use that word in conjunction or in exchange for the word slip, right? We slip or we relapse, making it an accident. Slip is an accident. Ain't no accident about it. It's not an accident. Oh, I fell on that glass. No, that's not how this happens, right? But we also know, like they say here, it is deadly. It is an unsuccessful suicide attempt when we pick up a drink. And unfortunately, at times, it becomes a successful suicide attempt. And that's what we have to get through our head before it becomes a successful suicide attempt. You need to understand the deadliness of this illness. So I think with that, we will stop for today and